The Indian Army evokes a sense of pride in all Indians, and rightly so. The olive green uniform, toughness, discipline, perks, and facilities provided by the government sounds very fascinating from a distance for sure, but the other side of the spectrum is full of challenges and sacrifices. So, today we have Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain, who has been a highly decorated officer in the Indian Army for more than 40 years. Let's hear about the ground realities directly from him. It's an absolute honor to have you here, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's start from something very basic, the history and evolution of Indian Army. Would you like to shed some light on a few benchmarks?
Okay, let's look at it this way. 1947, the current Indian Army came into being. But before that, it was called the British Indian Army. And what most people are not aware of is that the British Indian Army was actually a conglomeration of many armies of different kingdoms which came together. It really came to the fore in the First World War when the British Indian Army was 1.4 million strong, which is bigger than the Indian Army which is today. And we lost as many as 72,000 soldiers killed, Indians who were killed in the service of the crown in the First World War. And the size of the army was even larger in the Second World War, and we had huge casualties in the Second World War. So the army has been somehow, the Indian Army has been born with a martial tradition which comes down from the various kingdoms in which the army is used to be, and subsequently it was really tested as a professional army in the two great wars, the First World War and the Second World War. And thereafter, of course, it evolved into what is currently the Indian Army.
So, would you like to talk about how it all started for you?
As I told you, being second generation, I think my memories have to go back to the times even before I joined the Indian Army formally as a commissioned officer. My father belonged to a regiment called the Garhwal Rifles, an infantry officer. And my earliest memories are of the regiment, the unit in which he was, 1st Battalion of the Garhwal Rifles, of the Jawans. I was always very fond of roaming around the unit lines, eating in the unit langar, even going to the training area and training with the men, even at a very young age. I was very used to weapons around me. And somehow the camaraderie which I saw around me of those 800, 900 men stuck to the mind. It appealed so immensely that I could never think of any other profession. And that's why I joined the Indian Army. And I was commissioned in 1974 in the same regiment, in the same battalion. And I must emphasize here, in the army, we have a tradition called passing it on, which basically means that at least one member of a family, of a military family, joins the army and joins his father's regiment and unit. And this is exactly what I did. And the army gives a preferential, it gives a preference to people who wish to join their father's regiment and the units. And that's how I got a parental claim on the unit which I joined. I'm very proud to say that my father raised the unit and I commanded the unit also. He was the first commanding officer, I was the 13th commanding officer. Since you know the men so well, the men know you, you know the characteristics of the men, you know the history of the regiment, you know why exactly you are there.
So your father has been in the army, you have been in army for more than 4 decades, you've met so many officers, you've been with them. How do you see Indian Army as a career for today's youth?
These times are very challenging times, I'm very aware of it. There was a time when they used to say that the most uneducated people need to go to the army because it's just a question of being physically fit and commanding your men in action, leading them. Natural leadership skills. Today the world has changed. Leadership today is a subject by itself. It's a very analytical subject by itself. Technology has changed, and therefore you need to be a very educated person to actually know technology which is all applicable in the army, in the armed forces today. Besides that, the times have changed, the type of warfare has changed. It's no longer a conventional battle across the battle lines or the front lines. It is what you call today hybrid warfare. And that is that today we have a concept called the scholar-warrior concept. No longer is a warrior or a soldier considered to be sufficiently good or proficient in his profession unless he is an educated soldier. which means he must be technologically proficient. He must have the skills of the use of his weapons and equipment. But very, very importantly, he must have the skills of leadership. He must have the sensitivity towards the situation. And he must be worldly wise as far as geopolitics is concerned. He must know the world. An Indian Army officer must know what's happening in the United States, what's happening in Japan, what are the threats which are there to India's security. And unless all this develops, put together, you cannot be a wholesome officer. And in today's world, you need officers and leaders of that variety.
So I've been following you on social media and I see a lot of women asking you how can they join armed services. What do you have to say about this sudden change?
I think this was one of the finest decisions that the armed forces took. Early 90, sometime, this decision was taken and you found the first lot of women officers who entered. Now, women officers can only enter through the OTA, the Officers Training Academy. At Chennai, the Officers Training Academy is primarily for short service commission, which means that if you are past a certain age for NDA IMA and you are a graduate, you can apply and enter service for up to 14 years, which means that after 10 months of training, you will be commissioned as a short service commissioned officer. You will be able to serve for 10 years with the proviso that you can extend it for 4 years more. After 10 years, you will be asked whether you wish to become a permanent officer, a permanent commission, up to you. If you wish to become a permanent commissioned officer, you will be given the chance to be put through a board and then you will be incorporated as a permanent commissioned officer. So that's another route for entry into the army. But by coming back to the question on women, women can today enter the army only as short service officers. I'm sure a time will come and you will find that regular officers will also be commissioned subsequently. But at the moment, that is the situation. For them also, it is up to 14 years of service. However, there is a court case pending at the moment, I'm aware, at the highest levels, and that case is sub judice, which is still examining the whole issue of permanent commission for women in the army. But from my experience, let me tell you, I have found women extremely efficient in the arms and services that they work in. But women in India, young women in India who keep approaching me for this, I want to send them a special message. Please aspire. Just all you have to do is, I cannot give you all the qualifications which are required for you to enter the army. All you need to do is access. In today's world, if you are accessing the internet, then bharatrakshak.com, or you go onto the different Indian Army websites and you have enough information. Today's filling up of forms is all online. So it's just a question of a little bit of guidance. And if you are not being able to do that, then the best is to walk up to a local branch recruiting office, BRO, anywhere in your city or your area, and seek guidance from the people there, and they will tell you exactly how to go about looking at this possibility.
So in general, I've seen civilians still have a lot of misconceptions about Indian Army. Would you like to talk about a few myths and the actual realities when it comes to Indian Army, what the civilians have there in mind?
Now, let me re-emphasize on one of the myths that the army does nothing in peace, right? And I re-emphasize this because too many educated people have come to me and say, you must be having a gala time these days because there's no war. And then I have to remind them that I wish there was war. Because in war, the army relaxes, right? In war, you are doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You're trained to do that, and the army has no fear of that. It is when you are in peace that the real challenges of the time come. So that's a big misnomer. From morning to night, I know that at various stages of my career, I can say for the last of my appointments as the General Officer Commanding of 15 Corps in Srinagar, I think in the 2 years, I did not sleep for more than 4 hours a night. Repeatedly, continuously for 2 years, almost. Because I didn't know what was my next event. For 20 hours a day, I was working, or I was on the road, or I was traveling on a helicopter, or something or the other. And this is similar at every rank and service. You are always into it somehow. So let not people think that it's all, fun and games during peacetime. Peacetime is only, the term peacetime is only used to denote that there is no war. Otherwise, the profession is very much there and everything professional continues, right? The other misnomer, a lot of people, which I did outline very, did not put too much focus on perhaps, is this aspect that there is no place for some people in the army. That you have to be either from a rich background, or you have to be from a service background. Your father should have been in the army or the armed forces or in government to make it to do well in the army. Please, I want to put this perception at rest. We in the army only respect your capability. You must go to a unit and see how people from different castes, creeds, ethnicities, regions, and religions live together, and how they are commanded by people from different ethnicities and different religions, and how all religions function under one roof. For example, on a Sunday, I have, as a Muslim, with my men, I am the first person who will hold the puja ki thali, and I will make sure that the puja ki thali, I'm the first one with the aarti in the mandir. And similarly, you will find that there will be people from other faiths who will be there in a Muslim company or a unit where they would have kept a fast in Ramzan, and also probably prayed 5 times a day with them. So this is a very important aspect which must be sent, this message must be sent home to the people in India, that never ever feel that there is no place for you in the army. As long as you are qualified, as long as you are willing to work hard, as long as you want to enhance your education and your skills, there will always be a place for you. And once you have shown the propensity to do that, there will be no obstacles in front of you. It will ensure that you develop to the full. And this misnomer must be placed at rest, because one thing the army respects is total diversity. The people from any caste, creed, religion, anywhere you come from. There are many other misnomers of which people think that only if you are a merchant sailor that you will see the world. Let me tell you, I have been to 42 countries in the world, and as a soldier, okay, as a part of the army. So it's not that you don't travel in the army. So these are misnomers which are there in outside world, that, you know, the Indian army is very, very uniquely different in the sense that it does not, it's not like the usual kind of a thing, organization where anyone can come in and you'll be sort of taken along only because of the fact that you have had a certain type of a background or you belong to a certain caste or creed. Let me put all this at rest. This never happens with the army.
So how was your experience when you were stationed in Jammu and Kashmir? Some interesting experiences or challenges you faced during your tenure there?
Well, I was in Jammu and Kashmir for very long, and in all parts of Jammu and Kashmir. I've been in Ladakh, in Siachen, Eastern Ladakh, Kargil, in the valley, in many areas of the valley. I've been in Poonch, in Jammu area. So I would say at every rank I have been there, almost at every rank of mine, and I grew up in service there. First of all, I think as a message, let me tell you, it's a great experience to serve in Jammu and Kashmir, because the kind of challenges that it throws up in every field, whether it is the field of basic leadership, whether it is the field of the challenge of situations which present themselves because of terrorist action or because of the enemy, etc., or because of climatic conditions. For example, Siachen is a great place where it will test you to the hilt. And let me not talk about past days. Let me just take you 1 year ago. A year ago, you found a huge avalanche had taken place in Siachen, where 10 soldiers of the Indian Army had got buried. You remember that? Yeah. And one of them had been taken out. You know, they were buried under 35 feet of snow. I have served at that same place where they were buried. And the commanding officer of this unit was, and I must explain this to you a little more in detail. This unit was a Madras unit, regiment for the Madras regiment. And the commanding officer was a Gurkha. Okay. His name is Colonel Gurung. And now you see Gurkha's commanding officer with Madrasi troops, right? the kind of respect that the men had for this officer. They used to say that they would like to be in Siachen only under his command, because they knew that he had sworn that when they go to Siachen, there will be no condition under which it will be ensured that last action is taken to save their lives if a threatening situation arises. And when this happened, when this avalanche took place and 10 people were buried, everyone knew that the commanding officer is going to be there to lead the rescue efforts. And he himself went up from 15,000 feet to 20,000 feet, camped there, stayed put for 10 days under very, very challenging circumstances, and did the complete rescue operation with almost 200 people. And they managed to bring out all 10, one of them alive and 9 other bodies from there. It's a very emotional moment for a commanding officer to see the bodies of his own men like this. I can tell you that that you made sure that even people who have died, you have respected them, and you have made sure that their bodies were brought out and delivered to their dear ones. This is the kind of ethos that we follow in the Indian Army.
So, any more challenges?
Being in the Indian Army is all about challenges. There's nothing else but challenges all the time. I would definitely like to tell the younger people, it's very romantic to look at the army from a Rambo angle, that everything is about being a Rambo, that you have a weapon in your hand and you charge into a enemy's position, you spray bullets around. It's done in movies, and it's very nice to perceive it. But let me tell you, the officer, soldier, whenever I used to speak to my officers, I used to tell them, if you are going to be in a battle situation and are you going to use your weapon yourself and fire, then you are as good as any soldier. You're not a leader. You have to ensure that you use your brain, you use your experience, your capability and the power of your personality to lead your men. And that is what you are paid for. Not to fire an AK-47, because firing an AK-47 anyone can do. You are trained to do much more. And that is why I introduced to the Indian Army a system which is very closely followed in the US Army, called the scholar warrior concept. That is, that every officer must consider himself as much of a soldier as he is a scholar. He must be a scholar and he must be a soldier. So with that kind of a leadership capability and skill, you will find that there will be n number of challenging situations on the line of control, in the hinterland of the valley or in the Jammu area. Or, for example, I think probably in today's environment, the most challenging situation is in eastern Ladakh, when you find that in an undemarcated boundary, you find walk-in actions taking place by Chinese troops. How do you counter that? How do you counter that? Are you ready to immediately start firing and go to war? Or do you actually meet the situation differently by going up there, carrying out counter threats, making sure that you deliver a strong message, ensuring that you speak with authority, show the flag, also not be willing to bend at all? How do you ensure that these situations are all brought together without firing a shot? This is the kind of challenge that the army presents to you.
So, what's your take on AFSPA? Do you think we are moving in the right direction with that? Do you think it has realized its goals?
This is a subject by itself, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. And for your viewers, I must say, of course, there are two segments to it. There is one AFSPA which is 1958, which is applicable in Nagaland and in the Northeast in general. It was removed, if you remember, from Imphal, the areas around Imphal in Manipur, and in some areas in Assam. There's another AFSPA which is called 1990, AFSPA 1990, which is applicable to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And that is very much applicable even today. I think, first of all, people are not aware of what AFSPA is. So a lot of people who come up to question, a lot of people who write about AFSPA and say that it's the most draconian law, etc., probably have never read the act. Even if they've read the act, they haven't understood the application of it. There are only two parts to AFSPA. It's about empowerment of the army to conduct its operations without reference to a civil authority. And number two, to protect a soldier from prosecution in the event of his making an inadvertent mistake in the conduct of operations. AFSPA, of course, has empowered the army tremendously in the conduct of its operations, and without it, it's very difficult for us to really function. But having said that, over a period of time, AFSPA perhaps also needs to be reviewed from time to time as far as its provisions are concerned. The language which has been used in AFSPA was the language which was used in 1990. And as you see that in the growth process of human beings, knowledge changes, experience changes, and conflict itself brings about tremendous change. From 1990 to 2017, I think the situation has changed so dramatically that the language of 1990 may not be entirely applicable to 2017. So that's the spirit with which I look at AFSPA. I consider AFSPA an inevitable thing. As long as the army is deployed in Kashmir and Jammu and Kashmir, it will be necessary. But having said that, I also would like to tell people that it's not that the army uses AFSPA without applying its mind. It's not that we empower ourselves to unnecessarily harass, injure or kill people, which is why I'm emphasizing that the army also has leaders who are thinking people. And they know that we are not going to do this to unarmed people. The whole purpose of AFSPA is to empower us to conduct our operations against those who have picked up arms against the state. And as long as they are there, obviously AFSPA will be required to empower the army.
It was an absolute honor to have you here, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.